What other holy book would be as honest as Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 when he said, if this event didn't happen, forget about it? I'm paraphrasing, of course. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the linchpin miracle in the Bible. Perhaps you're thinking, well, what about the incarnation? When Jesus Christ, God, became flesh, the problem with saying that's the linchpin miracle is you can't look at a baby and know that the miracle happened. You would say, well, his life testifies that he is God. I would agree to that. But the incarnation cannot really be observed, but the resurrection of Jesus Christ can, and it was. Your entire life, your eternity is riding on this miracle, but we need to do some math. How do we even know about this miracle? Well, there was a book written about it. It's called the Bible, and that means you and I are relying on some eyewitnesses to be telling the truth. How do we know? You'll hear this slanderous accusation when you witness on university campuses. Well, other books get people to believe a lie. There's people who have been charlatans. What about Jim Jones? Valid point, but that is why we need to dig deep into these eyewitness biblical accounts. And what we are going to see is something unique from every other myth story. Let's dive in to our eyewitness accounts to see if indeed they are something that can be trusted. From Nathan Busenitz, the written eyewitness accounts were in circulation much too early to be a myth. This is huge. Why? Because if they had been written much later, all that time, people could have concocted stories, but when the eyewitness accounts were written near the event, there are people who could have busted the authors. Hey, he didn't rise from the dead. Everybody in Jerusalem knows that, but our eyewitness accounts were written close enough to the actual events, and guess what? Nobody said, you're fibbing. More details on the nearness of the accounts. A myth cannot be developed when people who can refute it are still alive. Number two, many witnesses were still alive when Paul wrote 1 Corinthians in about AD 55, give or take. Number three, many witnesses were still alive when Paul wrote Galatians in AD 49, and he certainly talks about Christ rising from the dead. Number four, a myth requires 2 or more generations to pass before it can take root. And finally, number 5, the best scholarship suggests the Synoptic Gospels were written within 30 years of Calvary. All that to say, the people who wrote these accounts claim to have seen them. Furthermore, the details that are given are so rich. Anytime somebody makes up a myth, you see, this guy he died and then he wasn't dead anymore. And they can be extremely vague. Why? Because you can't get busted. But when you've got a lot of details, that tells the reader, either they are a really intricate liar or this really happened. From Nathan Busenitz, first century fiction was not written in today's style of realistic narrative. There is no mistaking ancient myth with real history because ancient fiction never wasted time on unnecessary details that didn't drive the plot or promote a character's development. Go ahead and read any one of the mythological accounts of some sort of divine human being, and they do not have the specificity of the resurrection of Jesus Christ in 4 accounts. That should give you confidence. This is too detailed from individuals who wrote the accounts too near the event for it to be a myth. More from Dr. Busenitz. Mark 4:38, he cites, Jesus himself was in the stern asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? He was in the stern on a cushion. Why the detail? Oh yeah, because they were there and they knew the details. Verse number 2, that is an example, is John 21:8. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards away, dragging the net full of fish. Or consider John 21:11. Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of large fish, 153. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Who would know that there were 153 fish? Oh yeah, an eyewitness who is telling the truth. But there is more reliability to the eyewitness accounts. The written eyewitness accounts are too self-debasing and counterproductive to be a myth. Imagine you desired to be rich and famous and to have a lot of followers, and you were willing to write down details of your experiences following a poor Nazarene around Israel. Would you describe yourself as a buffoon? And yet, that is exactly what we read all throughout the New Testament. Authors of eyewitness events made themselves look foolish because they had actually behaved foolishly. Why would anybody who is desiring to trick people or to have them send in their tithes so that they can receive some sort of tchotchke so that they could fly around on a private jet? Okay, I'm getting my centuries confused, but you get the point. A charlatan tries to make himself look wonderful. The eyewitness accounts you read in the New Testament, they didn't look so stellar. 8 examples of this. Number 1, John never mentioning his own name anywhere in his gospel, instead referring to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. Trying to get rich, you don't do that. Number 2, Peter's courtyard failure at Jesus' trial, where he denied knowing Jesus 3 times. Number 3, the frequent bickering and pettiness among Jesus' closest disciples. They look like the Stooges. Number 4, Jesus never taking a side on political issues. 5, Jesus asking the Father that he might be spared the cup of his suffering. A tricky detail. Number 6, Jesus asking the Father why he had forsaken him. 7, Jesus being executed as a common criminal. And finally, an appeal to a woman's testimony, which in those days was not admissible in court. All of these details would not be included if it were a lie. I'll be needing to see some identification, young man.
Why?
Because you, my friend, are a lawbreaker.
No, I'm not.
You are, according to this video from Ray Comfort. Production, I need the clips on time.
911, what's your emergency?
We met about
Yeah, he asked me to
this.
become a gospel partner, and he took my credit card.